good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, you thirsty bunch of beer drinkers, whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. Thanks for tuning in and supporting a pure Canadian podcast. I'm Troy Birch from Great Lakes, Etobicoke's local brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery based right here in Etobicoke. Whether you're a seasoned connoisseur, a homebrewing enthusiast, into Ontario beer history, or just someone who enjoys some good old breezy beer banter between two fermenters, a podcast brought to you by your friends at Great Lakes Brewery, is your go-to deep dive for all things beer from an insider perspective. If you can, please subscribe to the pod, and ratings and reviews are always appreciated. Now, today on the pod, we're sitting down with one of the most serious, proud, and passionate beer minds and brewers in Canada, my good friend Matt Tweedy, co-owner and brewing director at Ottawa's Tooth and Nail Brewery. Matt's dedication to brewing excellence is second to none. Honest to God. He spent years honing his craft at some of the world's most legendary breweries, including Cantillon, Lost Abbey, and Fuller's. That's after developing his love of beer at Toronto's Beerbistro, where Tweedy made a name for himself in the industry in those early days, and where he met his now wife, Dana. He's brewed with the now shuttered King Brewery, building on the once legendary King Pilsner, advancing his skills at Beau's all-natural brewery, and in 2015, he took everything to Ottawa and created one of the most beloved and admired breweries in the province, the aforementioned Tooth and Nail. Now, as the brewery celebrates its 10th anniversary this year, Matt continues to push the boundaries of what great beer can be, earning a reputation as one of Canada's most respected brewers and voices in beer. His Vim and Vigor Pilsner ranks up there as one of the best beers out there, a beer that brewers and brewery representatives throughout Ontario love and admire. It's so delicious. In this episode, we'll talk about his brewing philosophy, the story behind Tooth and Nail, his beers, discuss his journey through some of the most influential breweries in the world, and find out what it takes to build a brewery that stands for quality, consistency, and simply mastering the basics. I'm not sure there is anyone out there that loves beer as much as Matt. So you're in for a treat today, as that love comes through with each word he utters, if it's not a sarcastic a word. So grab a fresh GLB, settle in, and let's explore the world of beer through the voice of Mr. Matt Tweedy. Hang tight.
Supporting local is more important than ever. Grab your morning coffee from a local cafe. Purchase fresh bread from your local bakery. Visit your neighborhood mom and pop shop or visit their online store. Secure your lunch or dinner from a bar or restaurant on your block. Local business needs your love, your support. Prop up your neighbors, man. Shop local. Your purchases, that money, it stays within your community. Now crack a beer as a reward, because you deserve it, and so do they. Supporting local never tasted so good. A kind message from your friends at Great Lakes Brewery. GLB, brewed for you, Ontario.
Hey, Matt. Welcome to Between Two Fermenters.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All the way from Ottawa to join us here. So that's awesome. It's been a while. We wanted to get you in the seat. You're here. There's a beer for you. What are you drinking?
I'm going to be having the Old Dusseldorf alt beer.
I think that's like the beer of the show. We were going to do like all Canuck and all. You can crack that sucker open. But we were going to do Great Lakes Lager was kind of like the beer of summer, and then it was like Canuck. But more and more, it seems we have Dusseldorf available year round now, just because I think it's the beer that the brewers know that I like to drink the most. And
oh, I think it's a brewer's beer as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we as soon as we put it on tap in the tap room, that's what everyone gravitates to. The brewers, the salespeople, everyone. But thanks for coming. You were at the brewery earlier today. What were you guys doing at the brewery?
I dropped in for a quick collab.
A quick one. You started at 7 a.m.
Yeah, that's right.
And what were you guys doing?
We were brewing a beer style known as Pilsator, which there's not a lot of information on that style of beer, but it appears that it is an East German style that was kind of defunct when the wall came down. Mm-hmm. An adjunct lager, which, if anyone knows anything about German brewing with the Reinheitsgebot, is generally outlawed, but because of the circumstances at the time, I guess East Germany allowed it. And I think you're looking at kind of flavors that straddle a Czech Pilsner and a German Pilsner with a little elevated alcohol. And it's probably the best
that's probably
description I can give.
When I was driving in this morning, we were talking about it with a colleague about what the beer is, and I said it's over my head. I'm going to have to ask Matt Tweedy or Matt Bod to tell me all about it. But from what we know, there's no one's doing this style anymore. So I think you said it like, hey, this is going to be. We can just tell everyone it's going to be the best beer. That's best Pilsner.
We nailed it.
We nailed it.
We nailed it today for sure.
So it was your first time at the brewery in a while, and you got a tour. What did you think of the brewery nowadays? It's like you said, it's been a while.
I mean, I think it's interesting because having worked for a year at Beau's that was under serious growth, there's just buildings added onto buildings, et cetera, et cetera. It reminded me of that in many ways, and yet in other ways not. It was pretty cool to walk around, see all the different areas, fermentation cellar, packaging area, the different toys, as I like to call them, that people have that I do not.
It's so unique to see now a brewery, and you've been to a lot of breweries, and we're going to talk about Cantillon because that's, historic, but it's weird to see a brewery now where every room serves a different purpose.
Yeah, especially for me, where we have one room that serves every purpose. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. It's like you go through a doorway into a whole new kind of set of things that I'm interested in, and you can isolate that interest from like the cellar. So walking through the cellar, like I've seen a lot of cellars, and Mike's showing me this DO meter that I'm looking at, going, I got to get one of those one day, et cetera, et cetera. And then you walk into the packaging room, and you got the state-of-the-art Krohn's packaging line that was so beautiful, and just, the busyness of all of that. At Tooth and Nail, we're on like a 3-head filler that 2 people operate, and there's not a lot of movement. And
one day. When I joined the brewery in 2012, we had an actual 5-head cask inline filler, and it was like we were lucky if we got 23 cans a minute. And now, moving up to 225 cans a minute.
225, it's amazing.
It's pretty something. It's been great to be part of. But how you been?
I've been good. Yeah. Trying to stay busy. This is a very interesting industry we're in right now. I feel like every day presents a whole new set of challenges and a whole new set of joys and cheers moments. And honestly, there's just never a dull moment in the beer industry.
As I say right now, it's like the merry-go-round. It's you get on and everything's good. You get thrown off, but you get right back up and you get back on and things are good again. And
that's because merry-go-rounds are fun.
They are fun. It's taken them out of public schools all over the country. It's when you were a kid, did they have the great big solid?
Oh my God, they were rusty and like definitely kids going to the doctor for tetanus shots. And we all lived through it. So.
I've been doing a lot of thinking about this interview and this chat that we're going to have today about what direction to take it in with you. We could do the whole thing. Honestly, we could do a whole podcast on just Vim and Vigor. Pick your brain, the ingredients, how you got to where it is today. Or we could just talk about your beer journey before you started Tooth and Nail. Because, as I said at the top, it's very interesting. Cantillon, Fuller's, and Lost Abbey. But what do you think about touching on all of it today? We'll just kind of here and there, bits and pieces, the early years, the apprenticeships, the days at King Brewery. I want to touch on that. And then get into Tooth and Nail and talk about your brewing philosophy. Sound good?
Yeah, I mean, I drove all the way here for you, Troy. So, whatever you're looking for.
All right, you buckled in. We're going to do 5 hours on Matt Tweedy today.
Let's do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
get a pillow.
We'll crack a beer first and then get a pillow. So let's talk about the early days. I want to talk about Beer Bistro because you were part of the early days of Beer Bistro. We just had Stephen Beaumont on the show the last episode. So for those listening, if you didn't check that out, it's the one right below this one. And we talked about how impactful Beer Bistro really was in Ontario at the time. Tell me about your experience there in the beginning, because as I understand it, on your very first day there, you spent that with Stephen Beaumont.
How do you know this?
I've been around.
That's true. That's true. My first day there. So it was interesting because I was at kind of a crossroads in my life at that time. and I really wanted to get out of the restaurant industry, but I needed a job, and I found this place, and I remember thinking, oh, beer bistro, like it's probably another one of these places that just markets beer but doesn't really know anything about it. And I walked in, and I had a beer there, and I looked at the menu, and the bartender, who's Matt Hardy and Greg Howard at the time, both of them were talking to me, and I was like, wow, this isn't a BS operation. Like, they know what they're talking about. And I left there going, I'm definitely going to get a job at this place. So I interviewed, had a great interview, got a call, said, yeah, we'd like you to be part of the summer team. Can you come in for beer training? And my brain just went, whoa, this is awesome. So I went in, and sure enough, beer training was with Stephen Beaumont. And interestingly enough, fact you might not know, but I don't know, you seem to know a lot, is that my now wife, Dana, was at the back of the room training to become the person who is going to lead the beer training in the future.
I didn't know that part, but I did know that that's where you met your now wife, Dana.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really meet her that day, but
Yeah. She was there.
She was there.
So how crucial was beer bistro back in those days? And what year was that when you joined?
So I joined them. It was either March or April of 2006. So I think they'd been open for 2.5 or 3 years at that point. I mean, for me personally, I would say that would be like the TSN turning point in my life. It really changed everything for me. I had a passion for beer that I didn't probably understand that I had. That went back probably a decade before that. I'd always been very interested in local beer, craft beer. I didn't know what I was tasting. I didn't know why I liked things, but I knew I liked things far outside the status quo of what, people are buying at a beer store. So when I went there, and I found that there was so much information available to me and so many different flavors available to me that I didn't know existed, it instantly became that thing for me that I was going to, I became obsessed.
So you're into beer, but you didn't know that you were into beer. You were trying to get out of the restaurant industry, but then you got in really into the hospitality industry it was a beer bistro that drew you there because of the name Beer Bistro, or was it just another job? You got there and you had beer, Craig Hardy, you said, at the bar, and then it just kind of, it just got you, it sucked you in?
I mean, it sucked me in, but it definitely became something very different for me than just a restaurant or a bar job or just learning about beer. There was, it was a very, very well-run organization, and to work for a well-run organization gives you a place where you feel like you belong. So that was a huge thing for me. And then just, like I said, just the information I was getting, the things I was tasting, the exposure to beer and food pairing, which is never part of my life before that. And I don't know. People have asked me, how'd you get into beer? And I was like, I don't know. It got into me, in more than one way, I guess. But yeah, that was it. And I don't know how to describe it any other way. It's just when you end up with something that is right, like your conscious, your body, like whatever it is, the energy around you, it lets you know in one way or another. So I knew then and there that there was a future for me in this discipline. I didn't know what that was.
You could see the writing on the wall. Yeah. You made a name for yourself there. I think that's where we met all those years ago. Do you think meeting the various breweries and brewery owners helped shape the career?
Oh, 100%.
Or at least drive you to want to get into the business? What was it about meeting all these people that were brewing the beers and talking about the beers that just, so you said you fell into it, but what was the spark that said, I'm going to take the next step now and I want to be a brewer, I want to get in? And did you want to own your own place at one point?
So, I mean, that's probably a three-tiered question for me. First of all, the brewers that I was meeting, there was a degree of, for lack of a better word, idolization that I had for a lot of these people, whether it was Phil DeFonso at King, whether it was Michael Hancock, Mike Duggan, people in Ontario, or whether it was Sam Calagione or Garrett Oliver. I wanted to meet them all and I wanted to get to know them. But at that time, I don't think I knew necessarily that I wanted to brew. And so I was teaching now the training courses at Beer Bistro, and I had written up a little book, and I was very passionate about the service side of beer and how to elevate that, how to pair it with food, how to make it something worth getting into. And then, I was still kind of struggling to figure out what I was going to do with my future. And there's a very, very pivotal point. I was sitting on a patio in Aylmer, Quebec at the yacht club with some friends, and we were, probably just burning time doing nothing because that's what we did. And we're drinking beer. And I was expressing to friends, like, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what to do. And one of my buddies was like, well, you've been really good at two things, skiing, and that's not really panning out for you at this point, and beer. So why don't you just become a brewer? And I remember holding this massive glass of Hoegaarden, looking at it. The
2-pound glass?
The 2-pound glass. And I'm looking at it. And the whole time, I'm going through my head, well, like brewing, that's not really a career choice and blah, blah, blah. They never taught me that at high school and all these things. And I'm sitting there going, well, somebody does it. And it was like I literally went home and started researching how to become a brewer.
And instead of doing
that fast.
And instead of doing like the brewing course at, back then Niagara College was 2010.
Yeah, it was.
So it wasn't around then. But yeah, you did you went on a different journey, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I just want to touch on probably the most important thing that ever happened to you during your time at Beer Bistro. You met your wife, Dana, who's now your business partner as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, tell me about that. Come on, we need a little personal stuff on this podcast.
Oh, God.
We need to make you cry here talking about.
No, but you guys make me cry
with joy.
Yeah, I mean that was very unexpected. Dana and I became friends through studying beer. Actually, we took a BJCP course together. We had traveled to a few breweries together with other Beer Bistro staff, and we were becoming buddies. And a lot of our friendship was based on talking about beer. Mm-hmm. We were both in separate relationships at the time. There really wasn't any like romantic anything at the time. And then, life took its course, and eventually our friendship grew into something else. And it was that's when it was kind of time for me to hang up the Beer Bistro skates, so to speak, because that wasn't gonna go on for very long and work out well. And it just, everything coordinated itself into a time where I was able to slowly leave Beer Bistro as we were becoming a couple, and at the same time I was kind of starting my professional career, so the timing worked out really well.
And you guys now have 2 kids, and
we have 2 kids.
You convinced her to move to Ottawa, which we'll talk about shortly. But so let's move into your journey from server to brewer. As I said, you embarked on a different path, a chartered one, if you will. Where did it take you?
So I mean that was probably quite a bit of influence from the late Brian Moran, who was extremely supportive of my choice to become a brewer. And he was obviously growing up through being a chef in all the different places that he had cooked at and run and et cetera. He really wanted me to take a chef's approach by offering to do stages at different breweries. And he said, well, if you're going to go do a stage somewhere, make sure you go to the best places, because there's no point in going to a half-assed place and trying to learn not so much. And then I ended up in just some different parties, different circumstances where I was around, some pretty influential people. And I don't know if it was the 6th or 7th beer that gave me the confidence to go up to these idols of mine and be like, hey, any chance you'd take a intern on for a couple of weeks? Yeah. And that's kind of how that started. So the first brewery I ended up going to was Avery in Boulder, Colorado. And that was really, actually, before that, more importantly, what Brian did for me was he said, do you want to go brew for a day at a brewery and see what that work is actually like? And I said, absolutely. And he called up Ron Keefe at the Granite. Oh, yeah? And Ron said, I don't know, does the guy want to be here at 5 a.m? I said, I'll be there whatever time you want. And so 6 a.m, I'm at the Granite Brewery meeting Ron Keefe for the first time. And I did a brew day there watching him brew. I helped empty out the mash tun. And I was like, this is everything I've ever wanted.
Amazing. I've never heard that story.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Brian went to bat for you, a server who was really invested in his company.
Yeah.
And that's a great story. And rest in peace. This is like 4th time we've talked about Brian recently. He did have such an impact on the industry, and on the people. There's a lot of people who went through Beer Bistro that have gone on to do different things in the industry, and so that's a great story to hear. So you went to the Granite, and convinced you, this is something I want to do. So what was after that?
So then I met Adam Avery in Montreal. Asked him if I could do an internship at his place for a couple of weeks. He said yes. Unfortunately, when I arrived, he had not really informed his staff of that, and they had never done that. And it was a big, bruised bunch of guys who really didn't want someone hanging around, and I won them over after about 10 days. But then I was absolutely convinced that this is the career path I wanted to take. Brian was in Belgium at Cantillon, hanging out, and asked Jean Van Roy, do you ever take on interns? And Jean said, yeah, every now and then. And 3 weeks later, I was at Cantillon for 10 days, fly on the wall. And then from there, I went to Fuller's. I think that's the chronology. And I worked a couple of weeks at Fuller's. And all of this stuff was really just observing, I then went on to Lost Abbey through schooling. I did my education at the American Brewers Guild, and as a part of that, you get to do an internship for a couple of months at a brewery. And I had chosen the Lost Abbey, and then I met Tommy Arthur at another party and asked him through the guild, can I come, at your place? And he actually welcomed me with open arms. And interestingly enough, I out of all of that experience, I don't know, 70% of it was learning how to make sour beer. Yeah. And then I opened my own brewery and never made sour beer.
I was going to say, which of the 4 that you just mentioned were the most impactful?
Every single one of them.
Yeah. Well, they were all different, really. Like Fuller's is English, and Cantillon, obviously, the lambics and sours, and Lost Abbey, you're doing a lot of sours, Belgians, and
lots of IPAs.
Okay, and then Avery was
kind of like the basics, beer,
right? Yeah,
hoppy stouts and IPAs and things like that. They had some good Belgian influence stuff. But I would say the number one thing I took away from all of that is it just shaped my mind in a way that I didn't know it was being shaped. So just the exposure to all of the different processes, the exposure to, different mentalities, different philosophies, honestly, like, is the best education I could have ever asked for. I didn't learn a specific task at any of those places that I still employ. And
really, I said world-renowned breweries. They really are. Those breweries are, right up there with, you name Cantillon to any real serious beer person, and it's one of the most respected institutions, if you will.
Almost,
100%. Yeah. Then you went on, you came back to, after you did your apprenticeships, you came back and you were like, okay, I'm going to get a job now as a brewer. And did you land at King first? That was the first brewery in Nobleton? No?
No, the first place I landed was at Duggan's Brew Pub on Victoria Avenue, Victoria Street, whatever it is.
75 Victoria.
So I was able at that time, to grab some shifts, and I knew that there was, Brian gave me a job as a very part-time manager. He needed a position filled. So I was able to do a couple of days a week at Beer Bistro and then walk up the street to Duggan's. Yep. And, I didn't really know what I was doing at Duggan's, if I have to be honest. Like I knew how to clean a tank and I knew a couple of these things, but that brewery was just set up so differently from anything I had seen that it was an experience being there. I mean, you're on a 3-floor brewery and it's not even gravity fed. I mean, you have the brew house on the main level, you have the cellar downstairs, but then the serving tanks are 3 floors up. And so I had to learn how to pump beer 3 floors up and just all these things. Yep. So that helped me additionally with understanding fluid dynamics and just some of that stuff. And then the opportunity came for King.
Oh, for King. Okay. So Nobleton, Ontario, set the stage. In the early days of the second wave of Ontario craft beer, King came on board. Phil DeFonso was a mechanic who was a home brewer, turned his, if I'm not mistaken, his auto mechanic shop into a brewery, and started producing a really amazing Pilsner. And then the Vienna lager came after, and I think he had a dark lager.
That's right.
So you went there, and I had a fondness for that Pilsner. It was I wouldn't say earth shattering, but at the time, it was really respected. What did you learn about your time there, and why should brewers today owe a little thanks and gratitude to what Phil did at that brewery?
It's a great question. I think that what people should know is that that was my dream job. When I was in brewing school and even before, Phil used to come in and drop off beer, and I'd be nervous to like talk to him. And I knew wholeheartedly that I wanted to brew lager to start. Mm-hmm. And I knew in my head that if I could learn to produce great lager, everything else would be not a breeze, but it would follow suit, because I knew how technical it was.
Yeah.
And so if I could understand the technicalities behind lager, then, so when I first started getting the idea to become a brewer, there was no hesitation in my mind that I wanted to open my own place one day.
So that's you
it was
now
from day one.
I'm a brewer.
From day one,
Yep.
It was the end result of where I wanted to be. Yep. And so I had to chart a course to like, how am I going to do that successfully? And I knew that learning to brew lager was going to teach me all the fundamentals of technical brewing that would help me to brew everything else. I had no intention to actually brew a lager off the bat at tooth and nail. But with Phil, what was so amazing about Phil, and first of all, I don't think a lot of people thought that beer was earth-shattering at that time, because we were so preoccupied with getting a good friggin' IPA in Ontario.
Yeah. I think some beer people understood how good it was.
Yes. It was an excellent Pilsner. His Dunkel, his dark lager, was one of the best I've ever had, still to this day. So I was really thrilled to get this opportunity and be able to brew these beers. And I knew that Phil was trying to step aside from the day-to-day brewing, and I had an opportunity to hone my skills. The other thing that Phil taught me that I will never forget is how important quality was. And his definition of quality resonated with me in a way that today might be one of the number one things that I learned from anybody. And so then it was just between all those experiences and working at King and working with Phil and talking beer with Phil, I think that's really the foundation of my approach to brewing beer today. And so Phil,
that's a good honor for, has he ever had the beer? Do you know?
My beer?
Yeah.
Yes, he has. But I believe it was his daughter, Christina, who got a hold of us at one point a couple of years ago, and it might have been a major birthday for Phil, and she wanted to surprise him. And then I got an email like 2 days later, and he had finished all the beers I had sent him. And
so he liked it.
He liked it.
Great.
Yeah, which was pretty awesome.
That's a great honor for you to say for him, because again, back in those early days of that second wave, it was a real struggle, and he was not a household name. King was not a household name in the market, and they've gone on. It's now, those beers are under the Thornbury, I think so, yeah. Name now. But okay, so you wanted to own your own place. You got the teachings from the world-renowned breweries. Then you came and you did some Duggins. You did some King. You moved on to Beau's All Natural in Van Cleekill, and you learned a lot about the recipes and craft there. So making your own beer and making the big decisions. What did those years? So if you said Phil gave you the quality and the consistency piece, but what did you take from all that experience and say, this is going to help me build my brewery? What was like the big thing that you took away from everything? And
that's a big
because
question.
You probably weren't learning the business side of things, or maybe you were, but
I was seeing the things I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
As you do when you work anywhere, and that's not a slight on anybody. The business side of things, I mean, I'm still considering myself not really on top of those. That's kind of a goal that I have right now, is to really understand business a lot better. But as far as what I wanted to put together, so there's all that. There's the travels that Dana and I did to various breweries all over the U.S., and we've both been to Europe individually, not together. And I think all of that became all-encompassing. We knew we wanted to open a brew pub first and foremost, and we wanted to make that a bit of a magical place where you sit in that room and it's unlike anything else. The quality of the beer had to be as good as, I could possibly ever come up with. But I think what I took away from if you look at the complexity of that background, I think the thing I took away from it is make things as simple as I possibly could. And especially on the brewing side, I learned, I wouldn't say the hard way, but it took a while to understand that the more simple the recipe, the more expressive those ingredients become. The more complicated the recipe, a lot of the time you get muddled flavors and things become a bit of a mess. And a lot of my brewing ethos comes from follow the instructions. I mean, there's so much material out there on how to brew beer. Trying to reinvent the wheel is kind of dumb.
throw in Fruit Loops or something in.
Well, it's not even the ingredients. It's just like the process of how a beer can become great it's all right there in front of your face. And then I think that as brewers, we really just kind of want to do something so unique all the time that we forget the foundations of good practice. Yep. And so I went into Tooth and Nail very focused on good practice, simple flavors. I also wanted to learn how to use the brewing system. So in order to make a really complex, crazy beer, there's no way I was going to be able to do that until I understood what the machinery wanted to do. And then the beers we were producing at the time, we were getting a lot of feedback going, no one does simple stuff like this. And it started to almost become what we became known for. So I think all of those past experiences and the mentality of going into opening Tooth and Nail was like, let's do some high quality, simple things that people will remember, has high drinkability, high
drinkability. Yes. You didn't open with like 5 different milkshake IPAs and all.
And that's not me, right? That's not, it's not my personality.
So it's September, October 2015. You and Dana open up the doors to Tooth and Nail in Ottawa, in the Hintonburg neighborhood.
That's right.
So we didn't really get into your background, your whole, I was a kid and this is where I grew up, but you went back to Ottawa. Tell me about how it all came to be in that neighborhood and the brewery. What were you looking always to do in Ottawa? Were you looking to do something in Toronto? Why did you pick there and how did you get it?
There were a couple of opportunities in Toronto that were presented to me that I could have maybe pursued. Being an avid skier, knew that I would give up skiing as a hobby if I ran a business in downtown Toronto. The access to the outdoors and recreation in Ottawa were really a big pull. And then I had to kind of convince Dana that this was a good idea.
She's from Toronto?
She's from Pickering originally, but lived in Toronto like throughout her whole young adulthood. I think that it was a tough sell in the beginning. And then when we made the decision that within 1 year, we made a decision we were going to have kids. We were going to open a business. We were going to move. We were going to make life happen. And at that time, these were massive, massive decisions. I remember telling a friend, hey, this is all going to happen this year. And he's like, you're out of your mind. And then we made it all happen that year. I think that, so if you look at Ottawa, you look at Toronto, and opening a brewery in each city, there's pros and cons to both, right? I think that we'd have a lot more business and have more kind of notoriety and popularity in Toronto. However, the expense of running that business would be pale, Ottawa would be pale in comparison to that. Ottawa's a much different town with different consumers, different mentality. It presents its own challenges and its own rewards. So we looked at that and decided, well, what's the lifestyle that we want? What life do we want to live? Where do we want our children to grow up and excel? and we both unanimously decided that Ottawa was the place, and it was a really good time for us to do that,
to get there.
In there.
Yeah, Ottawa, from my understanding as someone who sells beer in Ottawa and Toronto, Ottawa is very protective of locals. They love to support local business in Ottawa. Not saying Toronto doesn't. Toronto does too, but it's a lot harder for us to move into Ottawa and try to get a tap or work with bars and restaurants than it would be in Toronto. And same with you in Ottawa. You walk into a place in Ottawa, they'll buy your beer before they'll buy someone from Toronto.
Yeah.
So you get the keys to this place. What attracted you to the place in Hintonburg?
Yeah, so we had written out a business plan, and there were, if I remember correctly, a top 3 neighborhood kind of choice of a place, and Hintonburg actually was number 1 at that time, because Hintonburg had gone from being a really rundown and somewhat nasty neighborhood. The residents at the time had done a great deal of work to overhaul it and start bringing people into the neighborhood. And so we were watching these businesses open up and become successful. And there was a little bit of an eye on the neighborhood as the next great place. We had looked at various locations, one of which most people don't know is we put a bid in for Beyond the Pale space at the same time that Beyond the Pale did.
Which one?
The city center.
The city center one,
place,
okay.
Yeah. We were looking for much less space than they were, and I hadn't met Shane or Rob at that time.
Are you happy you got to know them now? I'm just.
I thought you were going to say, "Are you happy they got the space?"
No, yeah. Shane and Rob are characters, and they're great people.
Honestly, I couldn't pay to have better neighbors than Shane and Rob. Yeah. Like, they help us out so much. Yeah. It's awesome, and I consider them good friends. I'd like to see them more often than I do, but or maybe I'd like to see them when I'm not just over there borrowing a bag of malt. So anyways, we ended up in this, I had a real estate agent who was like, I'm sorry, I never even thought of this place. These owners have been trying to sell this place for years and not able to sell it. Maybe we can convince them to rent it. And we go, and it was a printing factory. And he said, you really got to like peel back the curtains and look at this place from exactly. Yeah. And I walked in and I looked around and I walked straight to the back where all the printing presses were, and I looked straight up and I was like, okay, there's like 16-foot ceilings. There's a massive garage door in the back. I was like, super solid concrete floors. And I was like, yeah, this is perfect.
This is perfect, yeah.
And this is the best part of the story. We drove away from there. I had no money. I just had a business plan. I had a passion. I had an idea. And I felt like there's no way in hell we're ever going to be able to pull this off, because these people need someone to rent it now. And we're not there. And Dana's words to me driving away from this place were, you better figure out a way to make it happen or we're going to end up divorced. And I looked at her.
Wow, that's an ultimatum.
And I looked at her how, what are you talking about? And she's like, I can't spend the next 25 years of my life listening to you groan and moan about how you should have been able to get that particular place and how perfect it would have been, and watching some other brewery go in there and succeed.
And you got it.
And we got it.
And you got it.
We got it.
So were you guys already living in Ottawa by the time you got that place?
I think no.
Were you driving back and forth looking at?
I know we were driving back and forth at one point looking for spots. I'm just trying to remember in my head so we moved back there in October 2013. I started working at Beau's in October 2013.
Mm-hmm. Were you driving from Ottawa to Van Cleek?
I was, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, I think we got that place I think we first saw it in April 2014. So we would have been living in Ottawa at the time. Yeah.
I'm always interested in how founders come up with the name of the breweries. Where did the name Tooth and Nail come from?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was a huge constant brainstorm for brewery names. And then you come up with these, fantastic names in your own mind. And then you Google them and they're already taken in some little suburb of Albuquerque, New Mexico or something like this.
And you respect beer too much that if, little place in Albuquerque had the same name, you wouldn't touch it. Because my
whole focus was to be original.
Yes, there's beer names from small breweries in this province and in Canada that they don't care if
You mean like Moxie?
Oh yeah. I wasn't going to touch on that, but
that was innocent.
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
innocent.
Different spelling.
Look it up. Look it up.
Okay, so where did Tooth and Nail come from, though?
Tooth and Nail. So I was listening to a song in the shower, and there were lyrics in the song about grab the tiger by the tail or something like this. And I was like, oh, tiger tail. And I was like, oh, that's stupid. And then they said something about tooth and nail. And I went through it in my head, and I had this kind of approach to like how I wanted to name this, but I couldn't come up with a name. And so Tooth and Nail really was like, it's a tip of the hat to, I mean, in my own mind, 3 specific breweries, which is Sierra Nevada, Sam Adams, and Anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, had they not fought tooth and nail to get their beer on the shelves or on the tap, because keep in mind, in the 70s and early 80s,
Yep.
like that was weird beer. Like bartenders would be like, I'm not putting that weird
Anchor
beer
was
on tap.
60s.
Anchor's
They were-
like 75 was Liberty Ale,
Yeah.
so they would have been
Okay.
late 60s, early 70s doing
When
their
Fritz
first.
bought it, it was like 60s, and he didn't know what he was
old.
doing. And
No,
yeah.
no. And so it was really because those particular beers influenced me like still to this day more than anything else. And without them having done all of that work, like there's no way Tooth and Nail would exist. I mean, who knows, maybe, but I wasn't going to be the guy to put that legwork in.
So you're in the shower and you hear this song or the lyrics to a song. You're thinking about it like nonstop.
Those days, there was nothing else on my mind.
Is that where the names of the beers came first, or was it the brewery name?
The brewery
came
name
first?
came first,
Yeah.
and then the names of the beers followed suit. But
Okay.
all the names of the beers, they've got a reason. So especially in the first couple of years, like every name for a beer was some form of a characteristic you need to possess to win a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So you need Vim and Vigor, you need to be a rabble rouser, you need fortitude, you need stamina, you need all these things. So that's how I named the beers. And I chose those names based on the specific liquid that was in the glass. I still try to do that, but I'm kind of running out. Thesaurus.com after a while.
I was going to say, that's a great way to look at it, because, a lot of breweries just... The brewers come up with, and thankfully you're a brewer, but the brewers come up with names when they're thinking about the recipe. And what you've done is you've actually gone on a thread, or you've gone on a theme, sorry, not a thread, where it's all about the name of the brewery.
Mm-hmm.
Where a lot of breweries are just like Great Lakes, it's just whatever fun name comes. There's no attachment to the actual... This beer is this beer is this, Canuck, Octopus, but we could come up with a whole theme of, Octopus wants to fight beers. I like what you've done with the Tooth and Nail, and
Yeah, thanks.
and continuously, like, all the names tie back into the master.
Well, I've always looked at brewing as, well, I mean, I don't know if it's more of an art or more of a science. It's a combination of both. But for me, it's my ability to express my art. And I was always really inspired by the breweries who had a cohesive kind of like plan, or like the labels were like, I really like the expression of the art of it. So for me, it's the beer is one part of a larger thing. And even if you come into the tap room, like I guess the word I'm looking for is intention. I want intention behind everything that we do, whether it's
People
brewing
can
the beer or
feel the thought process going into
I hope
not
so.
just the beer, but the brand.
And maybe they don't think about it, but I want the brand to be recognizable from that thought process.
If they ever meet you, they're gonna get that from you. So walk me through the brew house. I've been there, but listeners who have not been to Tooth and Nail in Ottawa, you walk through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
What do we see?
So it's an interesting building in that it was a printing factory, but the whole front half of the building where the bar is, that was all foam ceiling inserts and fluorescent lighting, and it looked like like something out of The Office.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we started pulling all that stuff back, we realized, okay, well, this is like I think the building was put together in either 1918 or 1919. So when we pulled all of that out, we were left with the raw components of the building, which is all like concrete and iron beam, rusted out iron beam, and old wooden slats. And they've been untouched literally since.
And in good condition too.
And in good condition. I mean, we had someone say, well, what do you want to do about the ceiling? And I was like, I don't know, take a vacuum cleaner to it and just get rid of the paint
So
chips.
as opposed to like Indie Ale House had so much struggle with their, heritage building in Toronto, you ripped out the fluorescent lights and the foam and
revealed this
revealed
really
a beautiful spot.
Almost like this old saloon in a way. And so I remember at the time we had a designer that had some ideas that weren't really jiving with my vision. And so we parted ways. And then Dana and I started conducting the general contractor, which I'm sure was a huge pain in the ass for him. There's no blueprints or anything. I'm like, well, try this here and try this here. But at the end of the day, I love bars, and I love the experience and the memories that I have from being in certain places with certain people at certain times. And I really think that the pub, the tap room, whatever you want to call it, that we put together is like a culmination of our travels and what's really important to us.
You put your own touches on it,
that's right.
is what you're saying.
That's right. It's very much an expression of who we are. And so you walk in and you go through the pub, and there's a lot of history in there. My brother had built some of the tables. Another table was built because during construction, somebody who lived in the apartment next door threw out a drafting table. It was this beautiful piece of wood with scratches all through it. So we cut that in half and created some other tables. So there's a lot of historical things in the building. And what most people don't know is at the very back is a very unique building. All of a sudden, the ceilings go to 16 feet high, and the building doubles in width. And so we have quite an ample space to have.
Was that an addition at some point in the history?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I believe it must have been, but I have no date on when that would have been built because all of the records for the building were lost in a flood in the 1990s.
And like you have a glass wall going into the brew house. Was that there? Did you guys?
No, we installed that, and we actually found a whole bunch of old used like pane windows because I really wanted some character to be in there. I love going to like great brew pubs that have huge big open glass and you can see everything, but that was going to look really awkward in this building that we now had. So I needed to kind of, what's the saying? You match the drapes with the carpet. I needed things to really work together in a way where it felt like it wasn't forced and it felt like everything was naturally put together. So we have these nice pane windows that you can see into the brewery with. They're a total pain in the ass to clean. But
honestly, it ties the whole place together.
That's right.
I really do think so. So is it your forever brewery, or there are plans for expansion one day? Because what is the size of the brew house in there right now?
So it's a 15-barrel brew house. We have as many tanks as we can put in there. There's no more room left in there.
Unless you take up seating in your actual tap room.
So, I mean, during COVID, we had talked about doing that.
Yeah.
And, there's always a decision to move something around and do something new. But for right now, I mean, we really need to max out what we can do in that building. And, will there be another brewery one day? I mean, this industry is pretty fast moving. Like I don't even want to predict what's going to happen tomorrow morning. So, so it's a tough one. I mean, I would love to, I would love to design another brewery.
Like a production facility?
Whether it's a production facility or just, I'd like to go back and redo what we did. I think we did it very well, but I can now see some of the naivety that I had as a young brewery, and now I've got a little bit more wisdom, I guess you could say.
And would that be, in Ottawa?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to move anywhere else.
You don't want to uproot the whole family again.
No, I don't. I don't think my kids would do so well with that.
So let's talk about your beers, because I mentioned up the top of the show, and I know listeners are hearing it from you while you're speaking into the mic, that you're one of the most passionate and serious beer people I've ever come across. And it comes through that way when you talk about your beers and how you brew beers, and your, as you said, everything's done with intention. What do your beers mean to you?
Are you talking about specific beers?
Everything. Yeah. See, there you go. That's Matt Tweedy's answer. Which beers are you talking about?
I mean, honestly, so my my beers I look at, they're very much like children to me, and each one's different, has a different personality, and I love them all equally. Some are more frustrating than others. And then
Girls
they turn
versus
around
boys.
and just whatever. Like I'm not going there. But I know them really well. I know when they're not behaving. I can deal with that to a certain degree, and then I really try to rein them in.
They're living.
They really are living creatures, for sure. And I get to have excellent conversations with my head brewer, Connor, and my assistant brewer, Jimmy, about what happened in this batch where there's just that minute little nuance that's different. What do we do there? Let's go back into the books. Let's figure that out.
And how are you getting that? Is from tasting?
Yeah.
So you know your beers intimately, inside and out.
100%. Yeah. And
do you think, sorry to cut you off. Nope. Do you think that's an issue in Ontario brewing right now, or Canadian brewing right now, that there's not many of you? You know, there's the Bims of the world, there's the Lackeys and the Macustras. And I'm maybe putting you on the hot seat here, but
damn Macustras.
Do you think people like you guys are really passionate and intimate with your products, and you can pick out the slightest nuance and then make that correction? Do you think that's happening across the industry?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. What I will say is that I do believe there's a degree of dedication required to produce something of excellence.
Mm-hmm. And so you refine every little nuance that happens. You walk through it with your team. How often does that happen right now?
It's constant.
Yeah, good.
And I mean, it's just one of those things, right? Like, we're craft brewers. We are working on very small systems with not a lot of technology available, with not a lot of bells and whistles. And so the only thing that I can rely on is my palate. And I rely on my palate. I think my palate is the thing that has probably gotten me as far as I have. And I have second guessed my palate before and regretted it. I literally have, when I was at the Lost Abbey, and it was my first week doing my apprenticeship there, and I'm working literally for one of my idols. Like, that's an intense situation.
You want to please, yet you want to impress, and you want to.
I kept my mouth shut, really. And there was a time where we had the Lost Abbey beer called Lost and Found at Beer Bistro, and I knew it quite well. And I totally forgot about this story. I was there the first couple of days I was there. Tommy said, "Here's a batch of Lost and Found. What do you think?" And in my head, I was like, "This tastes way drier than I remember. Like, it's almost too dry. It's not right." And I was like, "Oh, I love this beer so much." That was my answer. And he was like, "Yeah, we switched the yeast on this one. I don't like it." And I literally had a notebook with me, and I wrote down in my notebook, "Trust your palate."
Yeah.
Those 3 words.
Speak the words.
And I still have that notebook, and I still remember those words.
Do you share that with other brewers when you go in and try their beers?
I'm careful.
Yeah.
I will tell Ian, I will tell Bim, I'll tell all the people you mentioned, I will tell them straight up. Yeah. I'll be very honest. If I don't know the person that well, I don't really want to offend people. And as brewers, like, I do truly believe the degree of your, how involved you get with your own products is your choice. But I can't believe for a second that people aren't trying their hardest.
And caring.
Yeah. And so I don't want to deflate that enthusiasm. Yeah. If there's, like, diacetyl or DMS or something in a beer, I'll probably say something because that's good information for a brewer to have.
So now that we got all through that, walk me through your lineup. What are you offering year round, and what are some of your big seasonal beer ends?
Well, right now we've really honed in, so it's very different post-COVID, and I'm really happy with the situation we're in now. So we are doing Vim and Vigor Pilsner. Grace and Gratitude is our whole cone Saaz lager, which is
I said to you earlier, it's just beautiful beer.
It's taken us 2 years, probably close to 2 years to get the balance of that right. And now it's like, that's just what we drink a lot of the time.
100%.
Valor, our Saisons, is probably the closest to my heart. And even though Saisons don't sell very well, I make sure that is now available all the time. I think it's an exceptional beer.
Sell well in terms of canned product or both for
both,
you? Yeah.
Both, yeah.
Do you think it's an education piece, or do you think because once someone tries a Saison and they know what they're supposed to be, like a Saison DuPont, like if I see it, I'm going to drink it.
Of course.
But do you think it's an education piece, or do you think it's just like...
I think it's a combination of both. First of all, I think that Belgian beers can be quite divisive right off the bat because those are yeast contributed flavors that people aren't used to in the North American palate. So I think there's that. I also think that to introduce Belgian style beers with food gives people the opportunity to understand the complexity and how glorious they are. And that makes that like the first time I had I'll talk about the second time I had Modita. The first time I had Modita, I was like 15 and it was like a funny beer to buy and like 8% alcohol, like fruit bomb. This is, and we hated it. Second time I didn't love it. And that was at Beer Bistro, and we had it on draft. And then I had it for the third time with the steak at Beer Bistro, and I was like, I think I get it. And that was when I started to love Belgian beer. So I think Saison is a little bit of an education.
I had Modita and Le Fin de Monde on 750 ml bottles, cork top bottles, on the table with wine at my wedding.
Amazing.
And every table, and people got so fucked up because they were drinking it like it was just a regular beer. And
so this guy Krusty I worked with at Beer Bistro, one of the chefs, him and I found a beer store at DuPont and Bathurst that had like dusty ass 3-year-old bottles of Modite, and we just started buying
in the
them.
Cork 750.
And they were amazing.
But back then though, back at that time, I'm going to guess it was like 2006 to 2010. They were $4.50.
That's right.
In Ontario, which is insane. So sorry, continue on with the beers.
Fortitude Stout, obviously a bigger seller in the winter, but actually we do okay with it in the summer. And then Rabble Rouser, our IPA. It's not New England IPA. It doesn't have West Coast flavors. It's somewhere in the middle. Lots of mango and peach kind of flavors. A good dose of bitterness. It's a clear IPA. But highly drinkable. So those 5 are really what we run with. For seasonals in the summer, we have Discretion, which is a Belgian table beer, but it's got 13 flowers and fruits in it. Rhapsody is one that we'll probably do again this year. So that's taking the brute aspect and the enzyme they use for like a brute IPA. Brute IPA was not really my thing, but I saw what that enzyme could do and the way you could make beers with that. And then I applied it to things that I believed were more appropriate. So the first was like Breeze Hill Rosé. So we make a champagne style rosé beer with raspberries, strawberries, and hibiscus that's like highly carbonated and super dry and effervescent. But then Rhapsody is what I call a brute beer with peaches and green tea. And the green tea kind of takes the place of the bitterness of the hops, so it's really refreshing. And that was a goal to like make the most refreshing beer we could think of. In the fall, we have Victory Parade, our Oktoberfest beer,
which is a beautiful beer too.
Yeah, I love that one.
I think of the lagers. When I think of Tooth and Nail, I think of the lagers. Even though you said like you wanted to learn the lagers at King, and that wasn't the first beer that you weren't planning on doing lagers when you opened Tooth and Nail. Is that what your bread and butter is right now? Well, not your bread and butter, but is that what is kind of driving
it's
the
what
brewery?
we're known for sure.
But what are people missing if they're just thinking lagers at Tooth and Nail?
What are they missing? I mean, I truly believe our Belgian-inspired stuff is
second
world class.
Yeah. Good.
And I don't mind saying it. Like I truly believe that. I think I love them. And
well,
I'm a huge fan of Belgium.
For the longest time, everyone said, Canada and Ontario especially would be, we had this emerging craft brewing industry, but we were always 10 years behind the times of the Americans. And I think we've really kind of narrowed that gap. Our beers are amazing. And our Czech style beers. So you have one, BIM does a lot, we do some. There's a lot of breweries doing them very well. German styles. I think Ontario brewers are doing exceptional job doing so many different varieties of styles now. And again, like the lager from you guys, your lagers, your Pilsner line and everything, I think you're just, like you said, you're brewing with intention and you're mastering the basics. And people are starting to respect those styles of beers again. It's not just as hazy as you can be. It's not as throw in some peanut butter, whey protein powder, and
well, Ontario. So you make such a good point talking about us being 10 years behind the States. I actually wrote an essay to get into brewing school, and it was based on us being 10 years behind the States.
Oh, well, where do you think we are now?
I think that we are our own entity, and I think the quality of our beers can easily rival the quality down there.
Well, my point was trying to say that your Belgian style beers may be, world class. They may be right on par with, because technology's come a long way, but you've been to those other breweries and your world experience has allowed you to take what you've learned from visiting Belgian breweries and creating it in Ottawa. And it doesn't matter. You can adjust your water. You can use the same ingredients that they're using. And if you really care and refine every time you, like, as you said, you find one little thing, you'll change it for the next time.
I also think that as humans, we're creatures of putting the most effort into the things we love the most. And if I'm looking at beer, it's Belgian beer and it's lagers, right? Like so.
So is saison your favorite Belgian style?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like them all. I like triple. I mean, I love quadruples, but there's a time and a place, you know. But yeah,
I'll always remember the late Joel Manning when he came out with when he was on Mill Street. He came out with the Beetlejuice or Beetle Guys. It had different names, and it was a triple. And he said, "Oh, I took 2 growlers home." Which one? You shouldn't ever put a triple in a growler. You shouldn't put any beer in a growler, really. And he said he watched the first period of the hockey game and he realized he drank a whole growler. And when he went to stand up, his knees buckled. And because triples are sneaky buggers. That's what I always used to call them. They're sneaky buggers.
But to your point, there's one last thing there that you had talked about is people are looking for simplicity now. Like, if you take the last 10 years of Ontario craft brewing, which is what the people of Ontario mostly have gravitated towards, we hit the most bitter and hoppiest things we could hit. Then, barrel aged with high alcohol. Then the haziest, sour fruited. Like, we've exposed our palates to the most extreme flavors that were so much fun to drink and so much fun to talk about and share and try. And the whole reason I love beer is it brings people together, and these things have brought people together. I was going to say
that's the whole purpose of beer.
But now people are like, oh, right, beer can also be refreshing, and I can have 3 or 4 of them without falling over.
Yeah.
So I do think that this is leading back to some more, I hate calling them simple styles because there's so much complexity in the flavor, but
simple
5%
style,
alcohol,
simple
4%
style
alcohol,
to the consumer, but not to the brewer.
That's right.
That's
right.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing a total kind of throw back to the things that maybe we grew up with our moms and our dads, but being produced by craft brewers who are really trying to express a great deal of themselves and flavor in their products, as opposed to the macros of that time that were just competing on whatever they were competing on.
But yes, 100%. And then also knowing that the craft breweries are also helping it with community stuff and giving back to communities. And it's just another added benefit. Tell me about your process for coming up with a new recipe from start to finish.
So when the pub was really thriving, there were a lot of one-offs that probably didn't get as much time as I should have spent on them. I don't think we made a bad beer, but they all haven't been amazing in my mind. The beers that we make,
perfectionist though?
I've become less of one.
Okay, good.
I think there's a lot of perfection in imperfection, and that took me a long time to figure out. For the beers that I really love, I've always put probably a good solid month of thought into them before they actually hit the brew house. And I usually sit down with a whole bunch of ideas. I've probably brewed the beer 3 times in my head before we actually brew it. I usually start out with a more complex recipe, and I will look at it and say, okay, well, I have 5 malts here. I've got some dark malt, some crystal malt, a base malt, whatever. What can I take out of there?
Crystal malt for sure.
What can I disagreed. It's useful, and it's useful when not abused.
Yeah, like 1%.
Use it, don't abuse it. But I will look at a recipe, and then every time I review it, I see what doesn't belong there. What can I take out? If you look at a brewery like Sierra Nevada, so many of the beers are like 2 malts and 1 hop, or 2 malts and up to 3 hops, but they're not these muddled messes. And I think that promotes drinkability and refreshment. So I look at it, and when you get into dark beers like stouts and things, there's a layering process of ingredients that I use that requires numerous different malts and ingredients. But for the most part, I start with something and see what I can get rid of. How do I get that down to the least amount of numbers of ingredients?
I think you share a lot of similarities with Lackey in that respect. Years ago, and when he started to refine all the Great Lakes beers, that's one of the things he did. Let's use 1 malt for the IPAs. Let's use a couple hops, but let's make it as simple as we can and as flavorful as we can. And look where it's got us. What does the future hold for you and Tooth and Nail beers in terms of can sizes?
Oh, you had to
go there. I had to go there because, listen, I'm always trying to say 355s have their time and place. I don't like them personally from a sales and marketing perspective.
Of course you don't.
No, because they don't sell.
No,
they don't sell as fast, and we like our beer sold.
I'd like to bring back the 6-pack if I could.
Okay, we just came in with a 6-pack of 473s, but hey, no more crowlers either. 355s have a time and place. We do some. You do all 355s right now. Is there any indication that you're going to go 473s at some point?
I am currently having 473s designed for Vim and Vigor.
Nice.
And then probably Grace and Gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And then possibly a brand new beer we're working on. And then that will be that for the time being.
Yep.
And then if we're happy with that program, so I have to adjust my canning line, which isn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then adjusting it every time we do canning to go between 2 sizes of cans. I'm pretty sure I'll have a revolt on my hands. And so I'm not going to say for sure whether everything would go into 473s or not, but definitely Vim and Vigor is in the works to go into a 473.
That's amazing.
That I'm confident that I can tell you.
Have you heard from any of your consumers like asking for 473s, or is this a decision?
Oh, yeah. Okay, for years, for sure. But we also have the consumers who are like, don't ever put this in a tall can. So the number one thing I struggled with pre-COVID was like, there were 2 questions consumers in the bar would ask me. What's new on tap, and how come you're out of this old fan favorite? And it's like, well, there's only like so many tanks back there. I can't, so it's that same struggle where you can't please everybody, but I think people will adapt to whatever we decide to do.
If they're really good supporters of Tooth and Nail at 355s, they're going to buy 473s.
Yeah. I kind of look forward to seeing one, to be honest.
Yeah?
I mean, the artwork
I think it's
cool.
going to be, I think you're going to do a great job. I think it's going to be a huge hit for you.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a couple more questions before we get into rapid fire. Glassware. I want you to touch on glassware pretty quickly because you and I share an affinity for glassware.
I fucking love glassware.
It's the best when you talk about it. And, I wish I could create my own mold and do like a glass that is...
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it with you.
But we share an affinity for this. Why is it so important to you? And why should more people pay attention to what's in what glass?
Well, first of all, it creates an experience, which I think is the number one thing. Number 2, which is more important to me from a brewer standpoint, is every single beer is going to taste different out of a different glass. And if you don't believe me, just come down to the brew pub. Ask me to do it for you. I'll run you through it. I've blown people's minds with Vim and Vigor in different glassware. We choose the glass that we chose for Vim and Vigor because it tastes the best out of that glass. We have a brew pub where You can come in and try 8 different styles of beer out of 6 or 7 different styles of glasses. The customers ask why. There's a conversation point. Mm-hmm. You can tell them a story. They have an experience they haven't had somewhere else. I think it's fun to hold a different glass. I think it's fun to sip out of a different glass. I love the curvature. I love the different size openings at the top. I love the way they feel in your hands. I like that there's a purpose for each glass. I don't know. I think it was my beer bistro upbringing that really taught me to, and Belgian beer love.
So you put as much intention as that you do into your glassware that you do into beer,
as much as I can financially afford to.
Yes. No, it's something that I love. I love the different glassware. I love going into different places, and as you said, we sat down years ago and we took our Lake Effect IPA and we tried it in all these different glasses to find what glass would showcase this beer the best. And listeners, it'll blow your mind if you do this. Take different glassware, pour different a certain beer into all these glasses, and you're going to see how much it changes. And so how many glasses do you have right now at the brew pub? Probably 5 or 6?
Maybe a couple more. We got 1, 2.
You're
3,
a little bit more
4,
anal about
5,
glassware
6,
than I am.
7. 7. We have a kind of a like a festival tasting glass. 7, 8. We may have just brought in a 9.
And you're getting in
something like that.
Yeah. Again, someone who's so passionate and proud of their beers, make sure that they're showcased properly.
The glassware also, it's like for me as a brewer, if I'm thinking about a specific beer, that specific beer, there's probably a character in that beer that I would really like delivered to the customer first at top of mind, and the glass can do that. Right.
So that's part of your month-long process of the. Right? That's part of your month-long process of your recipe development.
It comes afterwards. It comes afterwards. But like if you drink Valor Saison out of the glass that we have, and you drink it out of a chunky glass, you're going to get way more of the fruit out of one glass, and you're going to get way more of the pepper out of one glass. So which one would I prefer the person get? Probably the fruit with the pepper as like a finishing touch. Yeah. If the pepper comes at you first, and then you're kind of, it's a little bit fruity, that's not as good an experience. Mm-hmm. And I know this because I try them all the time. Yeah.
I love it. I got a big question for you. What information, because I know some people, you've had that experience of going in and doing the apprenticeships at different breweries. So if you were to give someone seeking advice on how best to get into the brewing industry, what would you say to them? Because right now people go to brewing school and then they want to get in, just walk into a brewery. You did it a totally different way.
I did go to school though.
You did go to school. No, for sure. But you did it a different way. What advice would you give someone seeking your advice on how to get into the brewing industry?
I think the first thing I would advise is don't be afraid and drink and try as many different styles of beer as you can, because I don't think that there is anything that could be more important than developing your palate. From there, I would say, the resources, online resources are probably more plentiful than back then, but I bought every All About Beer magazine, every Brew Your Own magazine, every publication, every book that I could, and I started my own study. I went to school because I need that discipline, because I don't have that self-discipline. So that's something I knew about myself at the time, and I knew that if I wanted to fast track this, like going to school would be the way that I would succeed. But not everybody needs to go to school. But you need to educate yourself. And I would highly advise that you go and volunteer. I know that's new. I know that's not the way people do things.
Tooth and nail is accepting
volunteer. No, it has nothing to do with me. It's just that, there seems to be a mentorship and volunteer thing that's kind of gone the wayside. Mm-hmm. Go volunteer at a brewery and work on the packaging line and be accessible to that brewmaster and ask any questions, but make sure that you understand the difference between home brewing and professional brewing. Because professional brewing is not glamorous. Mm-hmm. There's one guy like me who gets to write these recipes and do these cool things. Everybody else working in there it's industrial labor.
You were doing that though, and then you move up and you move on, and
that's right.
And,
that's right.
Yeah, you have to pull your punches.
But you have to pull your punches. You should probably. So my path, I like my path. For me, it's not for everybody. Make sure you can run a keg washer for 2 months. Make sure you understand how that keg washer works. Make sure you understand not only the CIP of a fermenter, but why you're doing it that way. Because you got to work yourself up and it's the same thing as being a chef. You should be a dishwasher first. You should be a garde-manger. You work yourself up to the grill and the pans and all these things, because otherwise you're robbing yourself of the spectrum of knowledge that you need to do something really great in the end. And when you get to the position that I'm in, and even if you think some of the things you've done, you've ticked all the boxes and whatever, I'm still just a novice student of brewing still at this point, but I think you need to round yourself out. And so volunteering at some places, don't get out of brewing school and have a hissy fit because you're on the keg washer for a month. Like I did that, and I regret having that hissy fit because I learned very quickly why it was important for me to do that job. And then I shut up and did everything else. But yeah, make sure you're well-rounded. Your path is your path, but learn your palate, listen, don't think you're better than you are, and
take time.
Take time. You'll get where you want to go.
Okay, we're going to take a quick sec and come back with rapid fire questions. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Absolutely.
All right. Hang tight. We'll be right back with Matt Tweedy.
Okay.
Here we go. When you hear the music, go for it.
Will do. The GLB Brew Pub. 20 taps of the finest craft beer. Amazing food like burgers, pizza, Taco Tuesday. And check the retail store for amazing GLB beer, merch, and accessories. Open 11 to 11 at 11 Lower Jarvis Street, right near Sugar Beach. We know where you're going tonight. The GLB Brew Pub. A great place to see, the best place to be.
Nailed it.
We're back with Mr. Tweedy. Have you ever considered a beer called Tweedy Bird? No, I'm just joking. I can't do that to you.
No, but we used to do anniversary beers for our anniversary.
Yeah.
And at the time, because of all the stuff I talked about where I had worked, we were going to do, there were things that, so it was going to be a blend of beers we did the year before that had Brettanomyces and were barrel aged. Okay. So we did this for 5 years, and then COVID hit and the program became unsustainable. And I named them in the Flemish words for first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. But the second is Tweeda. But it's spelt Tweedy, but it's an E instead of Y, and everybody thought I named the beer after myself.
No, we were talking about doing this collab, and it was like, okay, what should we call it? Like, let's just cut Matt right out of this, and we'll just call it Tweedy Bird.
Yeah,
I'm like, sure he's. No. Okay, what beer have you been enjoying recently, other than Great Lakes or Tooth and Nail?
Anything by Unibrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go to Quebec every weekend and I pick some up, and those beers are still flawless and incredible.
Cans or bottles now?
Cans.
Yeah, okay. Name your celebrity doppelganger.
Oh, God. Do they have to look like me?
Yeah, well, that's a doppelganger, yeah.
I don't know.
I'm going to go with the principal from...
Ferris... No,
not Ferris Bueller. Breakfast Club.
Oh, dear God. Yeah. That guy, yes.
That guy?
Yeah.
Name a person or brewery in the industry that has or continues to inspire you.
Whoa. I mean, I don't talk to him very often anymore, unfortunately, just circumstances of life, but Ian McCustra has always been top of mind. Outside of that, all the pioneers, Ron Keefe, Michael Hancock, and publicans like Ralph and Milos, like all those people I hold in very high regard.
Amazing. Yeah. Very good. Best time and place for a beer?
Right here, right now.
Fat Boy Slim.
Fat
Boy Slim.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's Fat Boy Slim. Favorite brewery you've ever toured?
Gotta be. So it's either Fuller's or Cantillon. Fuller's because there's this whole historic gravity-fed party guile system that they actually keep in-house as part of a museum tour, and when you see it, you're like, whoa, I can't believe you brewed like that. And I mean, Cantillon's
it's Cantillon.
It's Cantillon.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it in the world.
If you could only drink one beer for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I would never choose that option. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Favorite place to grab a beer in Canada?
I really love the original Barvolo.
So I was talking to Ralph. I have a picture of you and Dana and Michael Hancock and Paul Dickey, and it was like 2007 at Volo.
Oh, really?
In the background, there you are, you young kids, or we're the same age or whatever, yeah. And you guys are in the background, and we cut our teeth at Barvolo.
Oh, yeah.
We all
100%.
did. How early is too early for a beer?
You're talking to a brewer. I mean, there's no time of day.
If you could have one beer with just one person in the whole world, dead or alive, famous or not, who would you choose?
Well, I lost a very close friend over COVID, so I would do anything to have one more beer with him. Yeah.
What beer would it be?
It would be an IPA of some kind.
That's what he liked?
Maybe mine.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Doesn't matter.
Last one, Mr. Tweedy, best hangover cure.
Skiing.
Really?
100%. Get on that chairlift. There's no more hangover.
Oh, there you have it, folks. Mr. Matt Tweedy. Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to visit us here at GLB today to brew the Pilsnator, for sharing your passion with us and the listeners, and for just being you. I love what you've done with Tooth and Nail and admire everything about your career to date. And it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and hope we can do it again one day in the future, because there's a lot more we can get into. We could do a whole podcast on glassware. Maybe one day we'll do that.
Well, maybe we'll make our own glass together.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
GLB, Tooth and Nail. Stay tuned for that. Okay, we're going to be right back with Around the Industry. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thank you so much. Such a great honor to be here.
Cheers.
Around the Industry.
In some very local news, Peter Bullitt, the owner and president of Great Lakes Brewery, was recently awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal for his contributions to the Etobicoke community. Presented by the amazing member of federal parliament, James Maloney, the King Charles III Coronation Award was presented to Bullitt in a ceremony earlier this week, recognizing his exceptional contributions to the Etobicoke Toronto community during GLB's 30 years in business. I'm extremely humbled to have been nominated and awarded this prestigious medal, said Bullitt. It was and is a complete team recognition, something I'm very proud to share with the team GLB. There were so many more amazing individuals in the community who were awarded the medal as well, and it was incredibly rewarding and inspiring to see and hear the stories and the impact that they made here in Etobicoke. So we're pretty proud, Peter. That's pretty good news. Pretty big for our little brewery here in South Etobicoke. Here in Ontario, staying in Ontario, the Premier directed the LCBO to pull all American-owned product off the store shelves, which they did. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't really affect beer, as all the largest American brands are brewed here in Canada for the Canadian market. Yes, support local, but support Canadian owned, not just Canadian made. So all the biggest American craft, or sorry, not American craft, but all the American brands that are brewed here in the province or brewed here in the country may not actually be owned by Canadian owners. Karma Simcoe IPA is back. It's hitting your local LCBO stores across the province any day now, and it's tasting better than ever. Lackey and the brewing team went across to Yakima, Washington, and selected the best Simcoe hops that they could find, and they're amazing right now, and we're thrilled with how the beer turned out. And we're going to end this segment with a shout out to our friends at Dominion City Brewery, who are behind the Canada-wide Glorious and Free beer collaboration. This Trans-Canada beer is an invitation for everyone to support local breweries and growers, brewing beer using all Canadian ingredients, sharing the Glorious and Free name and artwork, and standing up for our country. Over 29 breweries from various provinces are participating. If you want more information, head over to gloriousandfree.beer. And that's it. That's all, folks. Episode 31 with Matt Tweedy, Brewing with Intention, from Tooth and Nail, has moved from the mash tun to the fermenters. Today's episode is fueled by cans of Old Dusseldorf alt beer, which you can find at our brew pub, at our retail store, and bars and restaurants all across Ontario. You can visit the brewery at 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard in Etobicoke, or grab some delicious eats and fresh pours at our brew pub at 11 Lower Jarvis Street in Toronto. If you have any content you'd love to hear us discuss on the show, guest ideas, or just want to tell us what you're drinking, drop us a line at podcast@greatlakesbeer.com. Until next time, please remember to keep tipping your glass of fresh JLB in the right direction. Supporting local never tasted so good.
To learn more about what's happening at Great Lakes Brewery, visit greatlakesbeer.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter or follow Great Lakes Beer on your favorite social media platforms.